There's our happy sermon title. And there is a serious purpose in this. I think there's some things we need to understand about health, and I want you to understand that I have never been unhappy with the food I've eaten here. It has nothing to do with the food I've eaten here. I've always been happy with it. I am not lecturing to any particular person. I am trying to present objective information that's helpful. And I am not trying to point out any sins or shortcomings of anyone. Okay? I just want that to be understood. This is from Current Medical Diagnosis and Treatment, that's 2020 edition. And these are listed as the top causes of death in the United States of America. Number 1 is heart disease. 2 is cancer. 3 is accidents. 4, chronic respiratory disease. 5, cerebral vascular disease. And when you're talking about cerebral vascular disease, you're talking about disorders in the brain such as stroke or transient ischemic attacks, which are caused by disorders of the blood vessels or vascular system. Alzheimer's disease, which means you have dementia and you may not know where you are, you may not remember who your daughter is, etc. Diabetes, influenza and pneumonia, and influenza can cause pneumonia, kidney disease, and suicide. Now think about this. These are talked about. These were about the top 10 causes of disease in the United States of America. But they don't mention obesity anywhere. They don't mention eating anywhere. They're just saying, well, you have a heart attack, that's a cause of death. And the reason is when a physician signs a death certificate, they list the proximate cause of death. Like you come into the hospital, you have chest pain, you have a heart attack, you die. Well, that's a cause of your death. They don't mention anything about what went into getting you into that position. Obesity is now a true epidemic and public health crisis that both clinicians and patients must face. Normal body weight is defined as a body mass index, or BMI, calculated as weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared of less than 25. And this is actually all calculated for me on the chart. A computer does it, so every patient I see, I see the BMI. Overweight defined as BMI of 25 to 29, obesity as a BMI of greater than 30. And it is not rare for me to treat a patient that has a BMI of in the 40s or 50s. Not rare at all. So it is a problem. And here are some of the things associated with obesity. And remember the top 10 causes of death. Obesity is clearly associated with type 2 diabetes mellitus, hypertension, more commonly known as high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, and people probably have heard about high cholesterol, cancer, osteoarthritis, cardiovascular disease, cardio, that is heart, vascular, blood vessels. So that actually takes in the heart, and it takes in, it's cerebrovascular disease as well, obstructive sleep apnea, and asthma. There we have a lung disease, asthma, all caused by obesity. So what is the cause of death? Is it the heart that causes the death, or is it the obesity and the dietary habits that cause the death? What is it? So you look in red, these are the things that we've already covered of the top causes of death in the United States that can be caused by what you put in your mouth. How your food can kill you. Ones in red: heart disease, cancer, chronic respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. And useful information is, if you happen to be overweight and have type 2 diabetes mellitus, it is entirely possible that with the proper diet and weight loss, your diabetes can be cured. Same thing goes for hypertension. Same thing actually goes for cardiovascular disease. If you get on the proper diet, you can actually reverse some of those changes in your blood vessels and prolong your life that way. The rapid increase in obesity in the last several decades points to major roles in environmental and behavioral factors in its development, also from current medical diagnosis and treatment. Ultra-processed food addiction. And this is from MD Edge, Family Practice News, 9/19/24. This is something I, as a physician, getting emailed regularly about, current thoughts on medicine, current things that are discovered. Now, recent studies are unlocking why cutting back on ultra-processed foods can be so challenging. In their ability to fuel intense cravings, loss of control, and even withdrawal symptoms, ultra-processed foods appear as capable of triggering addiction as traditional culprits like tobacco and alcohol. That is something that everyone should remember. If they're too bad or too hard on someone that's addicted to smoking, and I'm not saying smoking is good, I'm saying it's bad, but there are other things that can be just as harmful and just as hard to eliminate from the life as smoking and alcohol, just as hard. Numerous studies have found that individuals who exhibit ultra-processed food addiction have more severe mental and physical health challenges. For example, and they abbreviate it UPFA, is associated with higher rates of diet-related disease, and they mention diabetes, greater overall mental health issues, and generally poorer outcomes in weight loss treatments. This is also fairly recent information. The 19th of last month is when I got this. Researchers from China and the United States rounded up 8,601 scientific studies on sugar and combined them to evaluate its impact on 83 health outcomes. And do you think any ultra-processed foods have sugar in them? Maybe so. Maybe so. The result is a list that cites the world's most common health problems like heart disease, diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, heart attack, high cholesterol, cancer, and depression. Okay, so people that commit suicide, you think any of them are depressed? Any possibility? Okay. Researchers looked at studies that evaluated the impacts of consuming free sugars, which means any food that contains processed or naturally occurring sugars like table sugar, honey, or maple sugar. And remember this part, sugar found in whole fruits and vegetables and in milk is not free sugar. This does not mean that you should not eat fruit, okay? It doesn't mean that. And one thing you can find, and you may have experienced this yourself, things that make you hungry are generally, or many times, those that contain free sugar, because what happens, you have an insulin spike. And that insulin spike with that free sugar, it somewhat overshoots what you really need, and you end up becoming a little hypoglycemic. And then your body tells you you need to eat. And that does not happen with whole fruit. It does not, okay? You get a whole glass of root beer, yeah, it might happen. But it's not going to happen with more complex carbohydrates you're going to get in fruit, sweet potatoes, things like that, okay? You may think you're going to get a free ride with artificial sweeteners, okay? People with higher above the median consumption of artificial sweeteners, especially aspartame and acyl sulfame potassium, had a 13% higher risk of overall cancer over 8 years than those who did not consume these sweeteners. And it took them a long time to figure this out. This was on the market for a long time, okay? And you can probably still find some stuff that this was in. And if you think that the other artificial sweeteners they've come up with are safe, you better, I'd give it, maybe 10, 20 years to find out the truth. Because, I'm rather skeptical. Higher consumption of aspartame was associated with a 22% risk of overall cancer and a 15% increased risk of obesity-related cancer. In other words, these did not keep you from getting obese, because your body, your taste, it thought that you were getting sugar and you still got the insulin spike. Okay? So I would say don't go with artificial sweeteners. Or you can wait, 10 or 20 years and find out how it really is. Okay? And this is God's plan, and this was given a few thousand years ago. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." And in this verse, the context obviously shows that meat in this verse means food. It does not mean something you get from an animal. It doesn't mean that. And since Genesis was written by Moses, Moses obviously knew that the original food was fruit, grains, and nuts, even though Moses would, to some extent, have been a meat eater. And how do I know that? First of all, God's followers were given permission to eat certain types of flesh food after the flood. Moses had been in Egypt, and Moses had also gone to live with it ended up being his father-in-law Jethro, and they lived in a wilderness. And you are not going to get a whole lot of fruit, grains, and nuts in a wilderness. And if you know anything about animals, there are certain animals that can do well on the very sparse vegetation that you will find in a wilderness. For instance, zebra. It can look like a desert, and the zebra will be fat. Okay, no problem. And in a situation like that, he probably would not have been able to find enough to eat just eating fruits, grains, and nuts. So he would have been eating clean foods. So he still knew that back at creation that had been revealed to him that the original food was, as the verse says, every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat. That's what it was. So go with fruit, rather than candy or root beer. I guess that would be the take-home message from this. So once again, what we've covered top causes of death in the United States of America. We've covered heart disease, cancer, respiratory disease, cerebrovascular disease, diabetes, and suicide. All those can be caused, by problems with diet. And you can see in white those we have not made an association with, but more is coming. Influenza and pneumonia connection. Patients with asthma, residents of nursing homes and long-term care facilities, or adults 65 or older, or persons who are morbidly obese, and persons with underlying medical conditions like pulmonary, renal, cardiovascular, hepatic, hematologic, neurologic, and neurodevelopmental conditions, etc., are at high risk of complications. And the complications, the major complications you're talking about with influenza is going to be pneumonia. And there are people every year that die of influenza. It happens every year. And all of those diet-related changes are associated with what is going to happen to you if you happen to get influenza. If you have those conditions, you're going to be at increased risk of a fatal outcome. So now the only thing we have left that has no association with diet, we have accidents, Alzheimer's disease, and kidney disease. Don't worry. We're going there. Preceding hypertension is associated with a higher incidence of subsequent dementia, both vascular and Alzheimer's type. Okay, we have the vascular in there, and we have Alzheimer's. Okay, so if you are on a plant-based diet, you are not going to be as likely to get either Alzheimer's disease or dementia or vascular problems. Chronic hypertension is associated with injury to vascular, glomerular, tubulointerstitial compartments within the kidney, accounting for about 25% of end-stage kidney disease. So a quarter of the people that end up on dialysis, it's associated with, with hypertension. So I think we have an association with diet too there, don't we? Over 67 million adults in the United States have hypertension. That's 29% of the adult U.S. population. Hypertension in nearly half of these adults is not controlled. And they're calling control less than 140 over 90, and actually it's better if it's a bit below that. So that gives you an idea of the extent of that. So about a third of us in here have hypertension. Okay, and it's common to be on more than one medicine. In fact, just out today was some new thing where they're going to put out a pill that has several high blood pressure medications in it. Okay, they're going to make a lot of money on that. Okay, I think you would be better off not having hypertension and dealing with that, and you can go a long way to only being on one pill if you were on any at all by diet, and that would be eliminating obesity, eliminating salt in the diet. Okay, and I'm not saying you don't have any salt at all, but you don't need as much salt as most people get. You don't. You can get by with very little salt, and years ago, I quit putting salt on things like tomatoes and stuff. I don't do it. And I don't miss it. Couldn't care less, okay? But in bread, you need a little bit of salt to make it taste right, but you don't need a whole lot. Effective interventions for hypertension. Reduce sodium and alcohol consumption, and even 1 or 2 alcoholic drinks a day can raise the blood pressure. And they're also recommending weight loss, regular exercise, potassium supplementation. If you take 1 banana or 1 orange, you get 8 milliequivalents of potassium. Okay, 8 milliequivalents, that's as much as you would get in the potassium tablet. I had 2 bananas today. Hooray. Okay, I have at least 16 milliequivalents of potassium in my body. And diet high in fresh fruits and vegetables and low in fat, red meats, and sugar-containing beverages also reduces blood pressures. But they're too timid to say get rid of meat. They're too timid to do that because too many people want to do that. But that's what God said. That's the best diet. So you can go with God, or you can go with current medical diagnosis and treatment and everything. So I would say, probably fresh fruits and vegetables and no red meats, and etc. Okay, the only thing we have left are accidents. And I could, I suppose, draw some conclusion that accidents were caused by diet too. Someone goes into diabetic coma and crashes her car or whatever, but I thought that would be stretching things a little too much, and I wanted to be fair. So I don't have accidents on the list, okay? I don't have that, okay? So some of the dietary approaches to better health, okay? Fat contains twice as many calories as protein or carbohydrates. So the less fat that you can have in your diet, the better, okay? So when I make bread, it has no fat in it. All it has yeast, it has salt, it has flour, it has water. And what happens when you make bread like that, it will get harder a little sooner than if you have a source of fat in it. It stay harder, but what you do, you just toast it, it's fine, okay? I like my bread. In fact, I brought some bread today that I made, so you can see if you like it. Exercise does burn calories, and say if you were to run an ultra marathon 2 or 3 days a week, you could probably burn quite a bit of calories that way. But that's really, for most people, you're not going to be losing a whole lot of weight with exercise. And exercise is good. It's part of a healthy life, but you're probably not going to control your weight by exercise alone and be able to eat just anything you want. Okay? Hypertension. Diet rich fruits, vegetables, and low-fat dairy foods and low saturated fats has been shown to lower blood pressure. Increased dietary fiber lowers blood pressure. You get no fiber at all in milk, meat, or eggs. No dietary fiber whatsoever. For every 7 grams of dietary fiber, cardiovascular risk could be lowered by 9%. So there is another strategy. Kind of goes along with Genesis, doesn't it? Fruits, grains, nuts, kind of goes along with that. A high fiber diet affects small intestinal metabolism, spurring release of the appetite-suppressing gut hormone, tyrosine, more than a low fiber diet, and it does so regardless of the food structure. Okay? So you won't have as much an appetite if you have high fiber in your diet. So dietary approaches: low in fat, minimal ultra-processed foods, plenty of grains, fruits, and vegetables, low in simple sugars, and low in salt. And I'll also mention have a question?
I do. Just about the ultra-processed foods. Could you just give an example of that, just to make it clear what an ultra-processed food is?
Well, I would say potato chips are probably ultra-processed. You take potatoes, you mash them up, make kind of a slurry. You add salt to them. We ever heard anything about salt today? And then we deep fry them in, what do we deep fry them in? Is that fat that we deep fry them in? They get that nice crispy brown thing. You have a little salt, little grease, and okay. So there we have potato chips. And I could mention other things. You have
veggie straws.
Veggie straws. I'm not trying to rain on everyone's parade, but I am not saying that I would never have a veggie straw in my life. I'm not saying that, but that forms a very small part of my diet. Okay, so I suppose some people could get addicted to veggie straws. Okay, but any other questions at this point? And we will have a panel today, but if someone has a question that's kind of burning a hole in their pocket, I guess not. Okay. As far as regular meals go, your body's circadian rhythm, it gets used to the times you eat. I used to have a very unhealthy lifestyle, and I have to say it was not really my fault. In emergency medicine, the way it works is they staff an emergency room depending on the number of patients that are expected. So starting at 7 to 3, usually things start warming up a little bit around 11, 12, and about around 3 o'clock it's starting to get busy. You have more people coming in at 2. So the hours of 2 to 10, 3 to 11, 4 to 12, those are the busiest hours. Probably have 3 people on there, which means that when you are sharing shifts with other people, you are going to end up working more of the shifts that work 2 to 10, 3 to 11, 4 to 12. You're going to work more of those. And I did that for years, swing shifts, and sometimes I would get a day shift, but those were, most people did not want day shifts, and there were certain national treasures that liked working night shifts, bless them, I say, and they worked more. But when you do that, it's hard to have, you can't have regular sleep, and it's hard to have regular meals. You know, it's not a healthy life, but someone has to do it, okay? And I did gain weight while I was doing that. So a strategy for keeping your weight as it should be would be regular meals, because then you get used to eating at certain times. When it comes time to eat, you are not as hungry. And if you get used to eating one time and then you switch it up, then you're going to be hungry at a different time and you end up eating more, okay? How about, we talked a little bit about cancer, and here's Dr. de Villiers and Dr. Zurhusen. There are good reasons to believe that other pathogens could cause chronic inflammation and thereby lead to cancer. Epidemiologic data suggests that dairy and meat product from European cows, also known as Bos taurus, you never knew they were called that, but anyway, Bos taurus, are a potential source because colon cancer and breast cancer commonly occur in places where these foods are heavily consumed, which includes the United States. And the rate is low in India, where they have holy cows and don't kill them, okay? In 1964, a new herpes virus, Epstein-Barr virus, was discovered in cultured tumor cells from a Burkitt lymphoma biopsy from an African patient. This was a momentous event that reinvigorated research into virus as a possible cause of human cancers. This is Chinese Journal of Cancer, 2014. And then this Harold Zurhausen, in 2008, received the Nobel Prize for his discovery that human papillomavirus caused cervical cancer. Who would have known a virus could have caused cancer? People are continually eating flesh food that is filled with tuberculous and cancerous germs. Tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated, and people would have laughed at this, not that long ago. This is Ministry of Healing, 1909, okay? Seventh-day Adventists, there is absolutely nothing in the Seventh-day Adventist health message that one can laugh about today, okay? They were well ahead of their time. And I've listed page 313 here, and that's because most people probably don't have a 1909 edition. If you go a couple pages before, you'll find the very same quotation in the 1909 edition, okay? Nearly all fish have some traces of mercury contamination. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency advises consumers to avoid swordfish, shark, king mackerel, and tilefish because they contain higher levels. And this does not mean that other fish don't have mercury. Mercury is a heavy metal that accumulates. So you can get mercury from other fish. So you can decide whether you want mercury. You can, if you want a little bit, if you don't think it'll hurt you. And just keep in mind that there are other forever toxins that fish consume that you can get when you eat fish, okay? So we're down dietary approaches to better health, low in salt and pretty low in flesh food. And I think you're better off without it, but we don't say you can't. And that I'm not going to look down on anyone. I'm just not going to have any, okay? That's kind of one of my red lights where I will not have it. But the things that, some of the things we think are bad now weren't then. This is from the modern, okay? Remember Modern Home Medical Advisor, copyright 1942. And this was actually directed at adolescent girls, okay? This was about them. Smoking cigarettes is not necessary, and again may be considered as a habit to be controlled until it can be indulged in with intelligence. As if there's anything intelligent involved in smoking a cigarette. 1942. That's not, really, when you consider it, it's not all that long ago. And here are some disorders. Okay, just a few of the disorders. This is from the American Medical Association Home Medical Encyclopedia, copyright 1989. Okay, this is 40 years later. Let's see the list about tobacco smoking: coronary heart disease, emphysema, lung cancer, mouth cancer, myocardial infarction, pancreatic cancer, and you can read that for yourself, and peripheral vascular disease, pharyngeal cancer, stroke, tongue cancer, bronchitis, and I'm sure we could add some others, but there's only so much I can fit on a slide. But smoking isn't good for you, and the Seventh-day Adventists knew this a very long time ago. Okay, also Ministry of Healing, 1909, tobacco is a slow, insidious, but most malignant poison. In whatever form it is used, it tells upon the constitution. It is all the more dangerous because its effects are slow and at first hardly perceptible. And I've quoted a 1909 book, but this actually was known long before 1909. Okay. And you may have heard how a little bit of wine is good for you. That has come out. That's tried to be pushed by some. Here it is, MD Edge Internal Medicine, March of 2022. Even very light alcohol intake is associated with an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. We remember reading anything about top 10 causes, top causes of disease, of death in the United States, cardiovascular disease, compared with not drinking at all, and the risk increases exponentially as alcohol intake rises, even at moderate levels, a new study shows. And here's one, MD Edge Internal Medicine, 22. Our findings suggest that the observed benefit in individuals with light to moderate alcohol intake, which is consistently shown in epidemiologic studies, is likely due to other positive lifestyle factors that are common in these individuals who drink lightly. Okay, so I kind of go with the spirit of prophecy and Bible on this. Okay. And here's something about coffee. Drinking 2 or more cups of coffee a day was associated with twice the risk of death from cardiovascular disease among people with severe hypertension. And I would ask, so it's twice the risk drinking 2 or more cups of coffee a day with severe hypertension. What about someone that only drank 1 cup of coffee a day with mild hypertension? Do you think it's doing anything bad? Maybe, do you think it could be making something worse, even though it's not enough to measure? I kind of think so. So that's also on my no-go list. Drinking 6 or more cups of coffee a day is associated with smaller brain volume and a 53% increased risk for dementia. So do you think if you drink less than 6 cups of coffee a day that your brain is going to be perfectly safe? Do you think so? I decided a very long time ago, back when I was in college, that my brain was bad enough as it was, and I was not going to take anything that would make my brain worse. Okay, that was kind of what I decided. Overweight people and pregnant women may experience mild GERD, that's gastroesophageal reflux disease. That's where you have heartburn, where a little acid comes up from your stomach, and there are certain things that will make that worse. There was one time I ate quite a bit of chocolate ice cream, and I don't do chocolate anymore either. There's actually caffeine in chocolate. I do no chocolate. I have not done chocolate for several years. But I got GERD from that, and that was the end of all that ice cream. But I still ate chocolate, but I don't anymore. Okay. Anyway, smoking, drinking alcohol or coffee, eating chocolate or high-fat foods may also increase the chance, and people that have recurring GERD over many years have an increased risk of cancer of the esophagus. This is something that would probably, we're probably talking doing this for several decades and having that. And people that have hiatal hernias, there's other reasons for having gastroesophageal reflux besides chocolate and all these things, but they are at an increased risk for cancer of the esophagus. And if you get that, you end up having no esophagus. Okay, it's kind of a bad situation to be in. I really like my esophagus, so I would like to keep it. And besides that, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to cure. You're probably going to end up dying from it. And here is really old medical advice. Really, really old medical advice. Tea, coffee, tobacco, and alcohol, we must present as sinful indulgences. We cannot place them on the same ground. Meat, eggs, butter, cheese, and such articles placed on the table. So I am not going to tell someone they're sinful if they have cheese or something. I am not absolutely not getting into that, okay? But here's the advice. Tea, coffee, tobacco, and alcohol, those are verboten for Seventh-day Adventists. Those are not to be indulged in, but you need to be convinced in your own mind on the rest of them and what works for you. And just by way of example, one of the persons I talked with at our last health expo was used to eating meat 3 times a day. And for someone like that, I would not tell them to just cut it all out and go to something else. First of all, they need to know how to do it in a healthy way, and they might need to back off a little slowly on that, because it could actually put them in a situation where they felt so much worse they would never do it again. So you have to take people where they are and use a little judgment in that before you tell people to cut it out. You present it to them and let them be convinced in their own mind about what they need to do. And this is found, you can get Ellen G. White Manuscripts Releases Volume 2, or the manuscript that was originally written in 1881. Seventh-day Adventists have known about this for a very long time. Okay? The question, we shall eat butter, meat, or cheese, is not to be presented to anyone as a test, but we are to educate and to show the evils of the things that are objectionable. And that is all I have. If there are any more questions from you at this time, I will be happy to try to answer them, or you can wait till the panel and we'll be there, 3 o'clock.